Every time the economy heated up, every time demand surged, remember baby steps, demand surged, and by demand we mean demand for residential construction, right? There'd be more people borrowing and buying homes, and there'd be more people borrowing and buying cars, right? That kind of, every time demand surged, production increase. What would happen to capacity utilization at the lumber mills? Up. What would happen to capacity utilization to steel mills? Up. What would happen to capacity utilization at the auto factories? Up. And as the capacity utilization surged higher, what would happen to productivity? Fall, remember? And what would happen to costs? And prices would go up. And so we have a booming economy and prices going north. And so what would the Federal Reserve do? The Federal Reserve would force interest rates upward in the hope of reducing borrowing, reducing spending, and therefore cooling the economy off. Make sense? All right. And it worked. And sure enough, when there was a recession, and you can almost tell, you know what, you could use this as a proxy for the consumer price index. It almost looks exactly like it, doesn't it? And so what would happen is the Fed would push the interest rates up, and then we'd have a recession. What's a recession? The gray vertical bar. And then once the home construction fell and the auto production fell and the lumber mills had layoffs and the steel mills and the auto plants had layoffs, then the Fed would allow the interest rates to fall. But as soon as the interest rates fell, what happened? Well, then, of course, everything would rush forward again, more housing and so on. It was like a horse, you know, a very frisky horse. You let the reins loose, the horse gallops forward. You pull back on the reins, the horse stops. All the Fed had to do was relax the reins, which is like saying let the interest rates fall, and the horse would run. Problem was, over time, prices rose. So over time, the interest rates rose. But it didn't really hold back inflation, because the trouble was that we could slow the horse down occasionally, but then the horse would gallop even faster. And so we had a cyclical, this was the old economy, boom bust, with rising prices in the long run. Make sense, Teresa? This was the old economy. Everybody get it? Now, who was president of the United States in 1979? Jimmy Carter. And he appointed Paul Volcker as chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. And Mr. Volcker came in and he said this has got to change. And so starting in 1980, 81, 82, what he did is he forced the interest rates up to an extreme high, and he just wrung all the spending out of the economy, like you wring the water out of a rag. And the economy collapsed into this terrible recession, 1981-82. Nationwide unemployment rate over 10%. Unemployment rate here in California in Del Norte and Humboldt counties over 30%, which is where they have the sawmills and so on. And sure enough, the rate of inflation came down. And from then on, the Federal Reserve was very vigilant. Anytime inflation started to rear its ugly head, up would go the interest rates. The ironic thing was that because the Fed was so vigilant, over time, inflation subsided. And so over time, the interest rates fell. Because the Fed was so vigilant in stopping inflation cyclically and would let the interest rates spike a lot on occasion, In the long run, they fell. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's what happened. And so, Mr. Volcker, in my view, is the most important chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System since World War II. Paul Volcker, V-O-L-C-K-E-R. He stepped down in I think I would say, I was going to say 1986, but he stepped down in August of 87. That makes more sense because then you add 8 years to 79 and it would make more sense. Okay, and Ronald Reagan, who was president then, he appointed Alan Greenspan. And Alan Greenspan followed in Paul Volcker's footsteps. His main concern was holding down inflation. Now, everybody with me? Am I going? Everybody okay, Mike? Okay? Everybody? Okay. Now, along comes the new economy guys. And they say, well, not only has the Fed figured it out, but we've got all this innovation. And therefore, inflation is kaput. And besides, we have all this stuff coming in from overseas, so you have to worry, don't worry about it. There's all these forces that are going to hold down inflation. And costs are going to fall dramatically because we've got all this new technology, this PC-related technology, right? And it's a new age, and it's going to be Dow 100,000 and blue sky forever. And therefore, Rebecca, a little irrational exuberance, who cares? It's all going to work out because we've got this growing productivity. Now, everybody with me? Now, what I would suggest to you, and what I would suggest to you is looking at the stock market. We've had a 1-2 punch. Okay? Right, we're just back at the S&P here. Remember that? We've had a 1-2 punch.